Hello and welcome to this session on the setup process for the Crowe Lease Accounting Optimizer. My name is Brian Markgraf and I'm a consultant and lease accounting subject matter expert. Our application offers many features that are useful in personalizing and managing your lease accounting. By setting up the application unique to your business, you can ensure your business needs are fully met and can feel comfortable knowing the journal entries are posted to the correct accounts. Let's review the agenda for this session. We will start by creating unique groups for leases. Next, we will discuss the lease posting parameters, specifically naming the journals to where the entries will be posted, specifying the accounts for each type of journal entry associated with a lease, assigning the number sequences for lease ID and index revaluation processes, and finally, choosing the accounting framework for the legal entity. We will then move on to setting up payment reasons, center details, and finally, our index rate types. Let's enter Dynamics 365 and begin to set up the environment. Please note that each legal entity will be separately set up to account for the differences in the chart of accounts and different details unique to each legal entity. We will first navigate to the lease group form under the Setup tab in our lease module. Here, you can create lease groups for your lease portfolio. Lease groups are used to relate similar fixed asset leases to each other. The lease groups are used to separate leases in your lease reports, assign posting profiles, and are a valuable criteria to filter your lease portfolio. There must be at least one lease group entered in before you use the application. As you see, we have our lease group for buildings, and to add another lease group for our machinery, we can click New, and for lease group, we can type in MACH as our abbreviation, and for description, we can type in machinery. We can click on Save, and we have now created a lease group for all of our machine leases. Next, we can take a look at the lease posting parameter setup. I will select lease posting parameters under Setup in our lease module and begin integrating our application with the general ledger. Correct setup of the posting parameters ensures accurate financial reporting based on your company's needs. One account per posting type must be set up before using the application. First, under journal name, you can indicate to which journals your initial recognition journal entry, invoice journal entries, and monthly journal entries will be posted. When you recognize your initial liability and initial right of use asset amounts, it will be posted to the journal specified in this dropdown. Next, when you post monthly journal entries, such as payments to vendors, it will be posted to the invoice journal indicated in this field. Finally, when depreciation expense and interest expense are accrued, they will be posted to the monthly journal entry, the monthly journal specified under monthly journal name. Next, we have the Delete Lease toggle button, which indicates if leases with posted transactions can be deleted. If this button is set to yes, the user has the ability to delete leases with posted transactions. Otherwise, leases without posted transactions against the lease will be able to be deleted. Finally, you can assign an approver to approve all invoice journal entries. This field defines the approver's name to auto-populate the Approved By field in invoice journal entries. The system will not allow for invoice journal entries to be automatically created and posted in a batch unless there is a name in the Approved By field. When we have selected an approver's name, we can navigate to the Account Setup tab. Within the Accounts tab, you can assign accounts to the journal entries associated to your lease. The Account Setup form allows your company to be as detailed or as broad in order to meet your business's financial reporting requirements. You will see the bolded headers for each type of journal entry, including initial recognition, monthly payment, monthly journal entry, and finally all types, which describes adjustments and modifications. Under each header are radio buttons associated with each of the transaction types available in the scenarios. You will select each radio button, and then in the grid, you will select if the account to be associated to an operating or a finance lease. By selecting Add, you can assign accounts specific to a lease group by choosing Group, and then clicking the drop-down and finding that group, and then assigning the account for operating leases, and then assigning the account for finance leases. And you can also even go one step further and assign it based on the lease ID, the specific lease ID. Next, you would repeat this process for each transaction type. I will give a brief overview of each of the transactions type. The lease asset accounts under the initial recognition header link the right-of-use asset account to be debited when a lease is initially recognized. Similarly, the lease liability radio button will link to the lease liability account upon initial recognition. Next, under monthly payments, the bank account radio button will link to the bank if the payment is directly debited from a bank account. Next, the lease liability radio button will link to the lease liability account that will decrease as a result of posting a lease payment. It is important to note, the lease liability and lease asset accounts will most likely be the same accounts across all section headers. Moving on to the monthly journal entry, where we can assign accounts to the interest and depreciation expense journal entries generated each month. The lease asset option should link to the offset account of depreciation expense for operating leases. Similarly, the lease liability option should link to the account that is credited when an interest expense is accrued each month. Interest expense links to the account debited when interest expense is accrued each month. The depreciation expense will link to the account that is debited when a depreciation expense journal entry is created. And finally, the accumulated depreciation links to the accounts that offset the depreciation expense for finance leases. Next, we will establish our relationships for lease modifications and adjustments under the All Type section. The lease asset and lease liability accounts will link to the right-of-use asset and liability accounts as we have previously stated from the initial recognition type and also the monthly journal entry type. A gain on lease modification occurs when there is a decrease in the lease liability beyond the amount of the carrying value of the right-of-use asset. Next, we can link the account when there is a loss on lease modification. Finally, retained earnings are affected when a finance lease is adjusted and classified from finance to operating. When this reclassification occurs, the right-of-use asset must be debited to equal the lease liability. The offset to this journal entry is a credit to the retained earnings account. And then finally, we have the variable payment, and this account will link to the account where the variable payments based on index revaluations and other variable payments will be linked to. Next, we can go to our number sequences tab. Number sequences provide unique identification numbers for both lease IDs and index revaluation processes. You can assign a new number sequence by clicking on the dropdown, which is populated by the number sequences created in the Organization Administration module. We recommend adding new number sequences for your lease ID and for your process ID. You also have the option to reuse the numbers. Next, going on to our accounting framework. With the Crowe Lease Accounting Optimizer, your company can account for its leases under either the International Standard IFRS 16 or the US GAAP Standard ASC 842 on a legal entity basis. Choose the applicable accounting framework from the drop-down menu. This selection will significantly impact how the leases are accounted for and classified. This selection will also dictate the options under the lease classification field when entering a lease. When our lease posting parameters setup looks okay, we can click Save, and we can head to our payment reasons setup form. Payment reasons appear for each line of the payment schedule and provide an explanation on the payment amount for that month. For example, common payment reasons could be simply payment for the base payments of the lease. Additionally, if the lessor offers a period of free rent, the user can create a payment named free rent to indicate that that payment amount for that period is intentionally zero. I will go ahead and create that payment reason now. And under description, we can say free rent period and click Save. Now when we go into our payment schedule, we have the option to assign a period of free rent or a period of payment for our payment reason. We can click Save. And next, we can head into our center details setup form to create names and descriptions to assign a specific location for each lease of your lease portfolio. Centers further define the location of your fixed asset leases and can be used for sorting and filtering purposes. Common examples may include corporate, for your company's corporate headquarters, or maybe even different warehouses or stores where the leased asset leases may be located. I will add a center for a warehouse in Chicago. Under center number, 2000, center name, warehouse dash Chicago. And I can click save. And now when I create a lease, I can assign it to the center 2000, which is a warehouse in Chicago. Finally, we can navigate to our index rate type setup form. In this form, we are able to add index rate types such as CPI, LIBOR, or other interest rates if leases in our portfolio have payments dependent on an index. Historical index data is stored in this form and should be updated to account for index rate changes. For more information on how our application can account for leases with payments dependent on an index rate, please view our other demonstration videos. I will now enter an index rate type of CPI and the description of Consumer Price Index. And I can click index rate. And for this example, we can say that on 1/1/2017, the CPI was 125. I can click save. And now if there's a lease that has payments tied to the CPI, the application can automatically account for those increases or decreases in the index revaluation. We are now finished setting up the Crowe Lease Accounting Optimizer and ready to account for our lease portfolio. I hope you found this session very helpful. Please reach out for any comments, questions, or if you would like to schedule a live demo. Thank you very much.